Wakaba, and this is the Farm Kenya show, and you're just in time for an incisive conversation and look at matters agriculture, agribusiness, and the economy of the next 1 hour. Today, of course, the show is delving into some of the most pressing issues in agriculture, and as we approach World Food Day this coming Wednesday, that's on the 16th of October, our main focus is going to be on a critical topic: how can we reduce food loss and food waste in ways that also help tackle climate change? Of course, this is with the fact in mind that having seen all this food that we have, that we produce, that we come across go to waste, how can we then use that to help tackle climate change? Now, is it that the crops spoil before reaching the market, or even the leftovers that you throw away at home? All that is considered food waste. Did you know that reducing this food waste and food loss can then not just be about saving food, but also saving the planet? This is now considered a key way towards fighting climate change. And that's what we want to look into here today, because every time that food is wasted, so are other resources like the water, the energy, the time and the effort that has been used to grow, harvest, and transport it. When this food also decomposes, remember, it produces gases that then get into the atmosphere. These greenhouse gases are one of the major things that is impacting the planet. Well, at this juncture, you can also then consider climate finance, because this is where this comes in, providing the funding that is needed to create solutions that reduce this waste and improve our food systems and thus protect our climate and our environment. Quite a bit to unpack there. Now, today we are thrilled to have with us in studio to discuss this very topic three experts who are at the foremost of these efforts. And to introduce them now, first we have Michael Onchabo. He is the director of the Food and Land Use Coalition. He's, of course, at my far end. We also have Anthony Etiang, who's Senior Technical Advisor of Food Processing Practice at TechnoServe, in the center in a white T-shirt. And then, of course, we have Gideon Kali Muli, who's the Sustainability Officer at the Society of Crop and Agribusiness Advisors. Well, I think we then get right into it, because they are here to guide us through how agribusiness can contribute to sustainable practices. And we, of course, are urging you to stay tuned as we explore how we can, of course, use climate finance to support the efforts that are going into waste reduction, create sustainable farming systems, and, of course, help secure our future. Well, let's get into it then with my guests, of course. I think we'll start off with Gideon. From where you sit, how can your efforts impact the topics that we're talking about? What exactly is it that you do that goes any way towards resolving or improving the situation around the topic that is food waste?
Well, thank you very much.
Please speak up.
Yeah, thank you very much. And as Society of Crop Agribusiness Advisors of Kenya,
yes,
we work within different value chains within the agriculture sector. And when it comes to food loss and waste,
I'll urge you to hold that thought while we check your microphone. Let me bring in my two other guests then. Let's go to Anthony. And the fact of the matter has been that, like we said, there is quite a lot that goes into this topic when we talk about food waste. And from where you sit, from your organization, what is it that you do that is centered around this topic?
Yeah, so thank you for that. As TechnoServe, we have a program that is funded by Bill and Melinda Gates.
Yes.
We call it NutriSave. Its key focus is to try and understand where food loss happens along the value chain. Once we understand what happens along the value chain and where food gets lost, we now try and look at what are solutions that we can develop to ensure that we minimize those food losses. So what we've seen characteristically for things like tomatoes, we lose close to 32% along the value chain. Most of it actually gets lost at the production side.
At farm gate.
At farm gate. So therefore, what solutions can we implement or work through to develop and capture some of that loss and transform it into a usable product. So our focus is on ensuring that we create products that can be used, number one, at what we call the bottom of the pyramid. So, and once we are able to get that product at the bottom of the pyramid, we also try and endeavor to make sure that that product is nutritious, because it's at the bottom of the pyramid where we face a lot of nutritional challenges. So our work is to now identify these are the gaps, who can we work with, and sometimes, the best way to, extend the life of a tomato, for example, is through processing. So identifying an appropriate processor who can uptake some of that raw material, transform it into a product that can be used at a BOP. Of course, there are certain things that need to be looked at in terms of, is it a cost-efficient process? Is it a product that is desirable at the bottom of the pyramid? Is it a product that can be used on a day-to-day basis, so to speak? Is the availability of that raw material consistent throughout the year? And of course, we do understand that during the rainy periods is when there's a peak in tomato production. When there's no rains, it drops, and that is where the losses mostly occur, especially during the rainy period. So how do we absorb those products? That's what we are looking at.
Yes, so quite a bit to unpack there. And I want to bring in Michael at that point, because your focus is on the food and land use aspect. Yeah. And for me, I think the good place to start would be that a lot of people don't consider food loss and food waste a big issue, especially seeing as a lot of our people are smallholder farmers. Yeah. And when what they produce at farm gate, what they produce in their own smallholder places is not utilized properly. No big deal. A lot of people haven't even thought about commercialization. You even have to take people through that. Where is the challenge?
Yeah, thanks, Peter, for that question. You're right that indeed most of the smallholder farmers have not really realized the potential or the losses that they experience through the food loss and waste aspects. And as the Food and Land Use Coalition, we're trying to bring together, members and businesses working together with the government to develop, for example, this protocol that will give guidance to the smallholders and any other player in terms of determining what happens, both at the farm level, but also in terms of along the distribution, value chain, along the retail, what happens. So really speaking to the farmers, we really want to work with organizations that are farmer-facing, for example, to really understand how to measure food loss and waste, especially at the farm, and what percentages that could mean in terms of the economic loss, but also make them, sensitive towards the environmental costs of whatever that loss that is happening at the farm contributes to. And in as much as we also trying to make them aware in terms of what interventions that they can put in place to address that food loss and waste that is happening at the farm. So in terms of the storage mechanisms, for example, proper harvesting, strategies, proper transportation mechanism, and before probably that product reaches at the retail. But also most importantly is the development of the thinking around circular food systems. So how do we encourage farmers to have this thinking around circularity so that one product within the farm, which can be considered as a byproduct, can also be used as a raw material in another enterprise. So in terms of what we can consider as loss can also be an input in another enterprise or a raw material in another enterprise, end up, consider that wholesome circularity, so that some of the products probably don't go to real wastes, but at least they can be useful in another form. So addressing those elements of understanding the amounts and what happens and how to minimize that, but also in cases where that can't be prevented, then the circularity comes in terms of converting those other products
I want to bring in Gideon at this point. And essentially, your title is a sustainability officer. And what he's talking about is essentially sustainability. When you think about it, the fact that there needs to be the thinking through what needs to happen even before these crops go into the ground from so many different aspects. Why do you think that is lacking?
This is majorly lacking because of lack of capacity building and information, dissemination of information to our farmers.
Yes.
Now, SOCA comes in with extension services that we offer to our farmers and sensitize them on proper production that you will be able to produce targeting a specific market.
Yes.
So that at the end of the day, you avoid food loss, that is at the production, at the transportation, and waste also to the consumers.
And when you think about it then, because we've seen instances, for example, during the last drought, Gideon, in 2017-2018, farmers in Nyandarua complaining that their cabbage was going to waste less than 100 kilometers away in the parts of the same county, people starving.
Sure.
Maybe you'd say this is an issue of logistics, maybe you'd say it's an issue of coordination. I mean, whatever the issue might be, how come we are not thinking through these things? Because this is government we are talking about, not some local farmer sitting in a corner of his farm twiddling his thumbs. Where do you think the disconnect is?
The disconnect, thank you very much for that question. The disconnect that is coming between the government and the practitioners in the ground is the policies, the policy environment that is there. The government is provides an enabling environment, rather creates an environment that farmers are capable of working so that to ensure that there is no there is no loss and waste. But for instance, we have the Sustainable Waste Management Act 2021 that advocates the separation of wastes. That is, and in this case, there is the organic waste, which we capacity build our farmers such that they can convert this waste into valuable materials through composting. And this, we've seen this working because we majorly work with county governments. We've been having a project called Regenerative Agriculture Practices for improved livelihoods and markets in conjunction with SNV, and we were working majorly on creating an enabling environment that is through policy advocacy. So we've been advocating for regenerative practices that will ensure that whatever is termed as waste, whatever is termed as that farmers have been burning before, they can convert it into organic inputs. And so that's where the gap has been.
The reason I asked that question and the way I asked it was, I'm trying to figure out where the gap has been, because from a policy perspective, in a modern economy, we should be seeing these things taking care of themselves as the need arises, such that then if that is not happening, then Anthony, as a technical advisor, then we should be seeing efforts to start to resolve this in a wholesome fashion that then gets this going. Is that happening?
It's not happening. And I think the biggest disconnect is information flow.
Yes.
Where one market does not speak to another market. As you give that example of, excess product in one area being dumped or be given to cows and a shortage in another area, because there's no communication between the two parties. There's no communication between the systems. Therefore, that gap continues to exist.
Yes.
There should be capability for one market to speak to another and simply explain, there's a shortage of this product here, and the other market can also say, yes, we have excess of it here, we can transfer it to your end. And that way, with proper communication, you're able to ensure that excesses in one area are transferred to another area. And that is a common characteristic, especially during the peak periods, where, typically with climate change and all these things, you find, rain has been plenty in one side of the country and less in another side of the country. So you find a shortage of certain vegetables in one side. And therefore, on the other side, again, we are throwing away these products. But if we can create systems of communication, a platform or whatever it is for either brokers or traders to simply communicate with different markets, to be able to share information of excesses and shortages, that way we can sort of level out the ground to be able to ensure that, transfers are made where they need to be made, so that products are available throughout the country. Another thing is, of course, the issue of transportation. When it rains in certain regions, roads are blocked out, and I think the recent El Nino rains are a perfect example of bridges being blown away or washed away, water in different places, roads damaged. So infrastructure again becomes another component of failure to be able to transport or transfer product from one side to another. With the proper infrastructure, we should be able to have seamless flow of products from one side to another. Yes. But first, communication. Second, we need to handle infrastructure.
Michael, I want to bring in, and at the juncture that with everything that we've talked about thus far, and when you think about the prevailing situation, from the point where our colleague here Gideon talked about working with the county governments, with agriculture being at the grassroots, and the centralized aspect of the sort of control that ministry and the government has, we have a significant gap in extension services, which would start to tackle some of the things that we're talking about. But we know that counties have mostly tried to deal with infrastructure, as is talked about, so we have roads. We know that the technology aspects are starting to happen. But this gap around knowledge creation, technical development, assisting farmers is still not there. No. Whose responsibility does it become?
Yeah, you're right, and thanks for that question, Peter. Of course, all those elements are important, and when we speak about what happens at the central government and the county governments and the gap in terms of the awareness, so one thing, just to add to the previous issue, is that I think there's this element of policy, which definitely needs to come as a guidance from government.
Yes.
For one thing, we were trying to scoop, and we realized we don't even have a policy that guides on food redistribution in the country, for example. So I think central government has a role, for example, to guide in terms of policy frameworks, the formulation of those policies and guiding how those practices should happen. Yes. So we are, for example, with other stakeholders like RETRAC trying to develop these guidelines in Kenya to guide on food redistribution. But as you mentioned, there are also some of the technologies that are now up. I mean, they are not yet maybe full-blown. I know, for example, Food Crowd is doing something to connect producers in some market and the consumers and retailers in terms of what's available for offtake.
Yes.
And that will kind of, reduce the wastage that happens. But also, I mean, I look at it in terms of this is a responsibility for all of us, of course, with government taking lead, and as you said, probably being anchored in the Ministry of Agriculture. But again, there's need for multi-sectoral approach in terms of coming up with solutions for most of these approaches. So government working with private sector, businesses, development, world,
yes.
and farmers themselves, so that we develop, if it's policies, they are well streamlined and every consideration is being put into place. And when we develop some of these technologies, probably led by researchers, or, innovators, or businesses, then those can be able to be taken up, and that now brings in the extension element. Who is there? Who has the updated the capacity with the latest innovations that are in the market, and then take that to the farmers. And that also is coupled now with what finance is available to support the farmers then to take up those strategies, those technologies, and they implement them, adopt them for the benefits of reducing that food loss and waste.
So having established that, gentlemen, then I want us to now go from the approach that these are the issues that are facing the sector. So what is it that we as various organizations are doing to play a role that will then move this conversation forward and start to provide broad-based solutions? I think we start with you again.
Yeah, for example, at the Food and Land Use Coalition, like I mentioned, we have this very targeted ambition to, for example, develop the protocols.
Yes.
And then train the stakeholders on what it takes. We need to have accurate data on what is lost, where, and what then interventions can be done, at which stages. Like Anthony mentioned, I mean, if it's at the farm gate, what are the best strategies to address that? And then after that, we want also to promote the circularity, like I mentioned. But beyond that, we also want to look at how do we, initiate some of these global initiatives. For example, we talk of the 10 by 20K by 30. You know, it is an initiative where the World Resources Institute, that is part of the Food and Land Use Coalition, is taking forward to kind of create and connect to organizations that will have potential to reach to 20,000 farmers and ensure that they take up food loss and waste reduction strategies and implement those strategies by first of all measuring what is the loss, where does it happen, what can be done, and then action, you know, target those actions, and then measure progressively what is the reduction like and what progress is being made in terms of monitoring and evaluating the effectiveness of those particular interventions over time, so that by 2030 we'll have, you know, drawn towards realizing the having food loss and waste, or reducing food loss and waste by 50%. And there are also other initiatives like Champions 12.3. I mean, like what even the World the Food and Agriculture Organization has done, going around the counties trying to train you know, food, create some awareness and sensitization within their respective counties, and even do documentation of those that are happening in various value chains. And that one, I think, when all is put together, I think we'll be able to be realizing, pulled together as various stakeholders, right from government, businesses, and all stakeholders, in terms of ensuring that targeted measures have been put in place, but we are also progressively following up on those interventions and the impacts they are creating and how effective they are. And I think we will even now work with researchers to also show us what is the, you know, the potential return on investment, because businesses will have to invest money in some of these technologies. What is the return on investment? Looking at the economies, looking at the economic benefit of what has been realized from the savings, from the reduction. And also, of course, that also speaks to the environmental cost. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Let's go to Gideon.
Yeah, thank you very much. To respond on this is that what we are doing as Society of Crop Agribusiness Advisors of Kenya, we are encompassed by, rather we have a pool of professionals across the value chain, whereby if it's advisory services in terms of extension, we are willing, or rather we even collaborate with partners who are already into food loss and waste initiatives, whereby we come in as experts. And this is evident in a scenario whereby, for instance, SOCA has a position paper that we've drafted to show the path that different counties, county governments, and also other organizations, the path and the footprint that they ought to follow, so as to ensure that this issue of food loss and waste is tackled. Another thing that as SOCA we do is that the producers, and in this case exporters, we ensure that they have experts to work with their farmers to ensure that you're producing for a ready market, and also you're producing the right quality, so that to avoid rejection of the products. So that is what we are doing, and we're also visioning to more partnership, because we cannot work in silo.
Let's come to you, sir.
Yeah, I think if I go back to my tomato example, because tomato is probably the second largest vegetable produced in the country and consumed. If we are able to identify, and we've done that, we've been able to see that, you know, at the producer level, we lose close to 50% of the total losses. If you're now able to identify what are the mechanisms of, you know, capturing that produce that is lost there. What we've seen is tomato, for example, has 6 different grades. Grade 1, 2, and 3 end up in either supermarkets or in marikiti. Grade 4, 5, and 6 end up remaining with the farmer. So how can that product be picked from the farmer and be utilized somewhere else? And one of the things we've discovered is, you know, as working with a food processor to be able to now capture that. So connecting a food processor, for example, to a broker who actually picks up that product, and having the food processor now develop products out of that. Interventions like, financial incentives for the food processor to be able to acquire equipment, for example, at a cheaper price, equipment that should be able to help them absorb a lot of these excesses when it occurs. Equipment that is also versatile enough for them to, during the low periods, they're able to, reuse that equipment for other things. Those are advantages that we believe if you're able to do that and support these food processors get to that level, they're able to now absorb some of that products. Right now, for example, we import quite a huge amount of tomatoes from places like Egypt. Egypt's production levels are so high that, even at price point landed here, it competes literally with products that we get here. So how do we enable our food processors to be able to capture, especially at the peak points, because at that peak is when we are very competitive with Egypt. How can we be able to capture those products at that point and be able to transform them into products that we know, markets can consume? So tomato paste, tomato juices, or whatever it is, products that we know that can be utilized, and creating markets for those. And products that have a longer shelf life, because then we can utilize them beyond the glut period.
Yes.
To be able to, to provide nutrition and also help, families support themselves with food. Yeah.
Interesting conversations, gentlemen. We need to go to a short commercial break, but when we come back, I want us to talk about the challenges that we are facing in our various organizations that then preclude us from being directly able to do the things that we are saying, so that we can start to see how those can be tackled. And then, of course, start to think about one key factor, consumer behavior, because it then affects a lot of what we are talking about. And then, of course, how sustainable climate financing can then come into play in that entire equation. But hold those thoughts. That is after the break. We want to go to that break now. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes.